Hello, I'm Esther Gidhu-Ewart. It's Thursday, June 22nd. This is Africa 54. As Sudan war escalates, Darfur Network for Human Rights and other agencies say Sudanese civilians are fleeing El Geneina to neighboring Chad following repeated militia attacks. Voters in Sierra Leone head to the polls on Saturday for presidential elections amid concerns that some of the country's youth may resort to violence. And a new modern art gallery at the Denver Art Museum in the U.S. includes two painters from Ghana. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. Sudanese civilians fleeing El Geneina, a city in Darfur hit by repeated militia attacks, have been killed or shot at as they tried to escape by foot to Chad since last week, according to the Darfur Network for Human Rights. Paul Ndiho has more.
Militias from Arab nomadic tribes have driven the violence in El Geneina over the past 2 months, along with members of the Rapid Support Forces. The paramilitary engaged in a power struggle with Sudan's army in the capital, Khartoum. Medical charity MSF said Monday that about 15,000 people had fled West Darfur late last week, and many arrivals reported seeing people shot and killed as they tried to escape El Geneina.
The body of people who the targeting died, still now, no one they remove them, still now outside in the road, in the house, because a situation of humanitarian crisis because still people lack of food, lack of the medicine, lack of the treatment. Because
the United Nations estimates the fighting that erupted in April has uprooted more than 2.5 million people, mainly from the capital, Khartoum, and Darfur, which was already suffering from 2 decades of conflict and mass displacement.
The civilian, they siege them more than 2 months, they're not allowing to go out. When you find this, women go out, rape them and kill them. The men go out there, out of the city, they kill them, abuse them.
RSF leader Muhammad Hamdan Dagalo has vowed to investigate the events in El Geneina. Earlier this month, West Darfur State Governor Kamis Abaka was killed hours after he accused the Rapid Support Force and allied militias of genocide. The widening footprint of fighting threatens to prolong the violence and draw in other armed groups, particularly those with tribal affiliations and external actors. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Voters in Sierra Leone head to the polls on Saturday for presidential elections. Older voters who lived through the civil war from 1991 to 2002 say they are concerned that the youth who protested last August because of the country's economic challenges may resort to more violence. Senanu Todd reports from Freetown on a door-to-door campaign aimed at maintaining the peace on election day.
Kali Mara was only 8 years old when rebels invaded his family home in 1991 during the Sierra Leonean Civil War. He recounts how his aunt was killed in his presence and his village burned down.
They cut off my aunt's breasts, both of them, and she bled to death. They beat us up with ropes and canes and burned down our houses. My uncle offered to give them money and cattle, but they refused. They said they wanted his life, so they shot him too.
Like Mara, many other Civil War survivors do not want a repeat as voters head for the polls. Some citizens say the youth have been agitated since a protest last August turned bloody and took the lives of more than 25 people. Fatu Bewa is a teacher in Freetown. She says many of her neighbors are fleeing to the countryside to avoid being caught up in violent disturbances.
Some youth are saying that they are ready to fight if they don't win the election. Some say the last elections were not credible, so they are ready to defend this year's elections at all cost.
For
The Residual Special Court Interactive Forum is a consortium of more than 100 civil society organizations, and they say some political aspirants are seeking to stir up trouble. They have therefore targeted potential hotspots for violence to campaign for peace and counter what they say is misinformation and unethical campaigning by some presidential candidates.
Because we want to make sure that our elections are very peaceful. So we are going out to tell the history of the world, to tell the history of violence, the effects of violence. Because young people who didn't know were the ones who took part in the insurrection last year.
Sierra Leone's national security officials say data available to them shows a significant reduction in this year's election violence as compared to 2018's. They say only 14 cases of minor disturbances, such as destruction of opposition campaign materials, were recorded between April and the end of May. They say there have been some cases of arson in the last few weeks, but say that everything is under control.
The military will be coming to support the police, but their intervention will be exclusively limited to static deployments and mobile patrols, just so that we are certain that in the event that a situation of security wants to degenerate, the military will be hand in hand to support its counterpart, the Sierra Leone police.
As Sierra Leoneans prepare to vote, many are hopeful that the day will be peaceful. Sana Anutod for VOA News, Freetown.
Sierra Leone's incumbent President Julius Maada Bio, who is seeking a second and final term, is expected to face a stiff challenge from main opposition leader Samura Kamara from the All People's Congress Party. VOA's Peter Clotty spoke to Abdul Fatoma, Executive Director for Campaign for Human Rights and Development International via Skype, on calls by some to postpone the vote.
There is no law that has currently banned the Electoral Commission not actually to proceed with the election issues. And yesterday, the Electoral Commission held their press conference informing the people of this country that they are ready, and also calling on the opposition that they are, an important part of this process. So he urged them to participate in the process, so let them call their members to come out and vote. So currently, that is the message we are spreading as an organization, and other Sierra Leoneans who mean well for this country are calling on the people of Sierra Leone, those that are registered, to come out on Saturdays and vote.
Abdul, I know the opposition group has taken the Electoral Commission chairman to court, saying he's not qualified to be there and that he was imposed on them. Some are even calling for an extension or a postponement of the election if credibility should be maintained. The main opposition leader, Samura Kamara, is calling for international experts to replace this crop of commission officials. Do Sierra Leoneans expect the elections to be free, fair, transparent, and credible, especially with these doubts raised by these opposition parties?
Supposedly, the Electoral Commission supposed to be credible, independent. They are subject to conduct elections under free, fair atmosphere, and they should be accountable and be transparent to the people of this country. And this is what also they have put forward as part of their counter allegations against them, that they have been, transparent throughout the process by ensuring that the opposition parties have been involved into the process and also have, freely participated in all of the process. And the contention here is about a data that pertaining, confidential information of citizens that registered with the Electoral Commission. So what the All People's Congress is asking for the signature or a thumbprint of registered candidates, and also your mother's name, your date of birth, your address, and your telephone number. That this information are with the Electoral Commission. So they're now asking that the Electoral Commission should provide them this information. And the Electoral Commission, on the other end, he's saying that no, this information you're asking for, they contain sensitive information about citizens, of Sierra Leone. And we cannot guarantee that you may handle them well. And there's nowhere in the law that oblige us to give this information. And clearly there's no law, because obviously the opposition has failed actually making reference. The provisions that they make into it doesn't actually have a bearing, on that very question they're asking. So that the court has not yet actually called on the Electoral Commission to stop the preparation for election process. So since there's no such order yet from the court, so the Electoral Commission have assured the people of this country that come Saturday, the election will go on and people need to come out and vote.
That was Abdul Fatoma, Executive Director for Campaign for Human Rights and Development International, speaking to VOA's Peter Claudy. Thousands of Sudanese continue to flee the war in their country every day, with many making the long trek south to Kenya. While a fortunate few have friends willing to help them, most of the new refugees are forced to live at the Dadaab refugee complex. Analysts say it is in Kenya's interest to help the new refugees and make an effort to end the war in Sudan. Victoria Munga reports from Nairobi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Journalingo and Press. This is Shakur Nyaketo.
33-year-old Shakur Nyaketo found shelter in this apartment in Kenya's capital several weeks after he fled his home in Khartoum, Sudan.
One day ceasefire has been very...
Nyaketo, a teacher and journalist, says he took off with his 7 months pregnant wife after their home was attacked by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. Nyaketo is out of work. He spends his time updating his followers on events in Sudan through podcasts. His once successful career in broadcasting and teaching, he says, is in limbo.
Actually, it makes me feel very hopeless. It makes me feel very bad and stranded. I don't really know what to do and where to go and how even to do it. And because in my country, I was very well established. I was doing my work, my business.
Nyaketo is among the estimated 2 million civilians who have been displaced because of the armed conflict between rival factions of the military government of Sudan. Nyaketo says all things considered, he and his wife are doing all right.
I'm in a safe place and I can access anything. I can access internet, I can communicate, I can go to media houses, my wife can be able to go to the hospital and everything, and we are expecting her to give birth in 2 or 3 weeks.
Nyaketo is the exception. Most Sudanese refugees in Kenya are living at the Dadaab refugee camps, which are already home to hundreds of thousands of refugees from Somalia and South Sudan. In a report this month, Doctors Without Borders said the camp is already overcrowded with new arrivals, and resources there that were already limited are now overstretched. A number of efforts to stop the war in Sudan have failed, but analysts like Masharia Munene, an international relations professor at the U.S. International University in Nairobi, say Kenya has a special interest in ending the conflict because the number of refugees arriving on its territory is growing.
It's going to be a strain on the country. In fact, that's one of the main reasons why Kenya has to be involved in finding a solution there. So once they are stable, the people don't have to run away.
Many of the Sudanese refugees entering Kenya and other countries have no one to help them and are effectively abandoned, says Doctors Without Borders. Abdisalam Adan Mohammed runs a training center in Nairobi where refugees can learn a local language and other skills. He told VOA it's crucial for host countries to protect escaping Sudanese.
To make sure that people can pass peacefully, and then they create a safe houses for them in the border to help the people who are running from the fighting. They are not traumatized and they have safety, and then give them counseling.
Kenya is host to more than 500,000 refugees, and their numbers are growing as conflicts in the region continue to rage. Exiled civilians like Shakur hope they can return to a peaceful country one day soon. Victoria Amunga for VOA News, Nairobi.
Greece is under growing pressure to launch an investigation into the June 13 sinking of a vessel that was carrying up to 750 migrants. At least 82 people died and hundreds are still missing, including many children. Most were from Egypt, Syria and Pakistan. Henry Ridgewell reports.
In the port of Piraeus Sunday, hundreds of protesters marched on the headquarters of the Greek Coast Guard and the European Union's border agency Frontex, holding aloft banners that said murderers. Greece's deadliest migrant shipwreck in years has sparked accusations that the authorities did not do enough to help. The boat set sail from Libya with up to 750 people on board. This footage was taken from a Frontex aircraft, showing the vessel off Greece on the morning of June 13th. The Greek Coast Guard said at first that the boat was on a steady course towards Italy, so it did not intervene. It later said it tried to aid the migrant boat by attaching a rope, but claimed the migrants untied it. This footage was taken from a ship that had diverted to help the migrants later on June 13th. The crew offered water and food. The migrant boat appears to restart its engine. The vessel sank later that night in Greek waters. Many survivors say the boat had lost power for several hours before it sank. The United Nations has called for an investigation, a demand echoed by human rights groups who say survivors' testimonies contradict the Coast Guard's version of events.
The survivors saying that the rope was given and the cause they understand that the cause of the incident was that rope tying them and then the ship taking the wrong turn and sinking. We think that it's really essential that a prompt, thorough and independent investigation and effective takes place. You can see from the aerial pictures too that this is an unseaworthy vessel. So you're obliged to intervene. This is your duty, and that there's a failure, there's a delay.
Greece continues to insist that the migrants did not ask for help and were not in danger until the boat sank. Greek police have arrested 9 suspects, all Egyptian nationals who were believed to be on the boat. Critics say Europe's migration policy is also to blame.
As long as we don't have sufficient policies in the EU for safe and legal routes, this kind of dangerous journeys will continue.
Survivors were taken to this migrant camp on the mainland. Amid the grief, there have been occasional moments of joy as survivors are reunited with loved ones. But hundreds of people are missing, presumed dead. Their loved ones are demanding truth and justice. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Let us know what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, the work of 2 painters from Ghana at an American art gallery. Stay tuned.
From the spongy and delightful injera in the Horn to West Africa's iconic jollof rice, African traditional dishes are as diverse as the continent itself. Over the years, the continent has also produced popular chefs who are creating unique cuisine for African food lovers. On this week's episode of Our Voices, we will explore how female chefs are telling African stories through their culinary skills, and we will meet acclaimed women chefs. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
You are watching Africa 54 from the Voice of America here in Washington, D.C. In other news from Africa, a coalition of armed groups in Mali are warning that the departure of a United Nations peacekeeping mission in the country will strike a fatal blow to a peace accord and threaten stability across the region. Mali's junta on Friday asked the peacekeeping force known as MINUSMA to leave without delay. Kenya's parliament voted late Wednesday to approve a contentious government finance bill that will double the fuel tax and introduce a new housing levy, handing a victory to President William Ruto. Ruto, who took office 9 months ago, is pushing through a raft of tax hikes as part of his maiden budget, sparking sharp resistance from the opposition, ordinary people, and businesses. And the Republic of Congo will hold a summit for countries with forest-rich river basins. President Denis Sassou Nguesso told a summit in Paris on Thursday that the Three Basins Summit would provide a space to encourage richer countries to contribute financially and help preserve the river basins and the resources in the regions. The U.S. is not backing down on comments made by President Joe Biden likening Chinese President Xi Jinping to a dictator. The remarks, which came a day after Secretary of State Antony Blinken's trip to China to repair bilateral relations, drew sharp criticism from Beijing. White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara has this report.
President Joe Biden's comments likening Chinese leader Xi Jinping to a dictator should come as no surprise, said State Department Principal Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel.
We won't hesitate to call out areas where we disagree or to be blunt and forthright about some of these differences. And of course, one of those areas that the President and the Secretary have been clear about is the differences between democracies and autocracies.
At a fundraiser for his 2024 presidential campaign Tuesday, Biden said that Xi had been unaware of the suspected Chinese spy balloon flying over American territory that the U.S. military shot down in February. That's what's a great embarrassment for dictators when they didn't know what happened, he said, adding that when the U.S. shot down the balloon, Xi was very embarrassed and denied its existence. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning hit back Wednesday during a daily briefing.
The U.S. remarks are extremely absurd and irresponsible, go totally against facts and seriously violate diplomatic protocol, and severely infringe on China's political dignity. It is a blatant political provocation.
Biden's comments were made a day after Secretary of State Antony Blinken concluded a trip to Beijing to repair bilateral relations that are at a historic low following the balloon incident.
If the engagements we're seeing are then followed by such direct criticisms from very senior officials, I think the Chinese side is going to ask what the point of the engagements is in the first place.
While Blinken's visit failed to produce any breakthrough, he and Xi had agreed to stabilize the U.S.-China rivalry so it does not veer into conflict. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News, Washington.
6% of all maternal deaths around the world are caused by obstructed labor, according to the World Health Organization. That's when a baby can't move through the birth canal. It can also lead to obstetric fistula, a condition that can have a long-term impact on a woman's health, especially in developing countries. Reporter Eid Wesu has more from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, in this report narrated by Omari Kaseko.
Christina James, a resident of Kahama in the Shinyanga region of northwestern Tanzania, traveled for more than 900 kilometers to CCBRT Hospital in Dar es Salaam in search of fistula treatment. Obstetric fistula, caused by prolonged and obstructed childbirth labor, has a devastating impact on women. The injury, which causes a person to lose control over bladder and bowel movements, can lead to further complications if not treated. James says she struggled with fistula for more than 2 years before she received surgical treatment.
I delivered the baby naturally and I was supposed to get stitches at the hospital, but after getting the stitches, they ripped off. I was sent to the hospital, but I already had a fungus infection.
Despite seeking help, James says her medical woes did not end until this year when she arrived at CCBRT Hospital.
I'm asking for anyone who has a child to look at them carefully and send them to the hospital when she feels pain. We shouldn't leave to people who don't know. They cause us a lot of problems.
The memories of her healing journey, she says, are painful. She was socially isolated and laughed at, and found herself unable to work because of the shame associated with her injury.
She wants to change this situation for others. Doctors in the country also want to encourage women to understand the condition and seek help. Daniel Michael, a surgeon at a hospital where James is getting treatment, says the community also needs to support women.
We are asking if we can help these women in a timely manner because the biggest problem of fistula occurs during labor pain. These patients are ignored, so we are asking at the hospital level, patients shouldn't be in a long extended period of time of labor pain. And if the hospital can't help them on time, they should refer them as quickly as possible.
Every year, according to World Health Organization, between 50 and 100,000 women are affected by obstetric fistula, which can be treated usually through surgery. For Idi Wesu in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, Omar Kaseko, VOA News.
The new modern art gallery at the Denver Art Museum in the U.S. state of Colorado includes 2 painters from Ghana. VOA Scott Stearns has more.
Denver Art Museum's newly renovated modern and contemporary art gallery features a wall of double portraits that includes the Henri Matisse painting Two Sisters and Martin Maloney's Overexposed. Added to the collection are 2 works by artists from Ghana. Rory Padakins, the gallery curator.
We curiously have this collection of double portraits, and I thought it would be interesting to kind of celebrate that, to celebrate connections between people, literally that are happening within the painting itself.
Ghanaian painter Cornelius Anor's Aboke was acquired by the museum last year.
The ways in which he's created the image is that he's also applied fabric to it. So there's these textiles from Ghana and from Africa in general that's also added onto the painting itself, and it adds this kind of richness.
Ghanaian painter Emmanuel Taku's Black Halos reflects the artist's childhood love for Superman comics.
As he got older, he realized that he never saw characters in these comic books that looked like him. And so as an artist, he wanted to sort of portray all of his figures with this kind of superhuman strength. And so they're usually pupilless. It's at that point where the Superman character becomes his most powerful.
The reinstalled gallery draws from a collection of more than 8,000 pieces. Scott Stearns, VOA News, Denver.
And that wraps up our show this Thursday. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.